Hi, good morning. It's Rod Fleming in the Philippines here. I hope you're all well. Today we're going to talk about variations in the erotic target location error. And what we're going to talk about is where that is actually located, on the form that it's located on. Before we get on that, please remember we do need your money, so please go onto one of the sites that I'll give you the details for, going up on screen, and please send us some money. Simple as that, you know. I can't do this as a charity. Can't do this for nothing. You need to help me. You need to pay me in order to keep making this sort of thing. Okay, so these variations in erotic target location error. Now, we tend to see the erotic target location error in somewhat simplistic terms. Because we're talking about autogynephilia, we normally would talk about or consider this to be simply a man's erotic desire to himself be a woman. So it's autogynephilia is a man's propensity to be sexually aroused at the thought or image of himself as a woman, and that image becomes the target. It becomes his erotic target, but it's in the wrong place. The erotic target is meant to be someone outside the self, not part of yourself, and that's why it's a location error. And Blanchard was completely right about this. This is absolutely smack on the money. Now, what we haven't discussed in really very great detail is the enormous variety that exists in the nature of the location error, in the nature of what comes to be the nature of the autogynephilic artifact. Because what actually happens in autogynephilia is that the individual will develop an artifact, that's a representation of a person inside himself who is his beloved, his erotic and romantic target. And if things go pear-shaped enough, that can take over, and that can become, the dominant part of his psyche. So at that point, he's like, I'm a woman. I need to be a woman, because he has created an artificial woman inside his head and allowed her to take over. And we normally think, well, that's just a woman. It's a woman, it's a woman, it's a woman, all women are the same. It's not like that at all. The ETLEs are immensely complicated, and they can be on literally anything. There has been discussion in the past about furries, for example, and many people think that furries also have an erotic target location error, but it's on themselves as furry animals, And it's all loads and loads of fetishes and paraphilias. They involve erotic target location errors, but they're all very different. And the thing is that within autogynephilia, there's not one, it's not just one. There are really as many different types of erotic target as there are different autogynephiles. It's not just, a woman. It's a particular woman. We all have, we've said this before, we all have erotic targets. And the erotic target could be, that's your type, that's your type. If you're a heterosexual male, that's your type of woman. She might be blonde, she might be brunette, she might be tall, she might be somewhat less tall. She might be, curvy, or she might be slender. But, you do have a type. You have one that you go, that's my type, And when you see a girl like that, you go, hi, she's nice, And you might even try and make contact with her and see if you can arrange a relationship if you're free to do so and it's appropriate that this is done, That's your type. And if you click, when people talk about click, that's what it is. You've just met someone who's really your type. The type that you've established in your mind, as being the kind of person you really would like to be with. And she clicks, the person clicks. She fits that very closely, that preconceived model. Now, when they're erroneously located, erotic targets still follow this rule, such that they can be basically anything. And one of the ones, the one I want to talk about today, is where the erotic target isn't actually on a woman, but it's on a homosexual transsexual. That is, a trans woman, but the very young transitioning childhood gender dysphoria type, the homosexual or the true transsexuals, who tend to be extremely pretty, very feminine, and highly attractive. And that's why some men develop an ETLE on them. But these men are also autogynephilic. They're getting turned on by the idea of being an HSTS. But they can't be an HSTS because these men are never homosexual. They're always heterosexual. And so unless you have to be homosexual in order to be a homosexual transsexual. It's absolutely basic. If you're heterosexual, if you're attracted to women, even if you're attracted to trans women, that's still a heterosexual attraction. You can't be a homosexual transsexual. It just can't happen. It's not possible. What happens is that I have recently come across a case, a man who lives in England. I'm not going to actually go any further in identifying the person. If you go through my recent posts and videos, you'll find enough about him to do so, or as much as I'm prepared to go. He lives in a major city in England, and he's 60 years old. He's a classic autogynephile, elderly transitioner, but his erotic target appears to be located upon himself as a homosexual transsexual. And this was made obvious when in recent exchanges with myself and a number of others, where he basically fired off a huge narcissistic rage response when he was basically told, no, you can't actually be a homosexual transsexual if you're not homosexual. And homosexual transsexuals are the same as homosexual non-transsexuals. They're the same thing. It's the homosexual bit is identical. There's no difference between these types except the way they look. And this caused him, basically brain meltdown, which made me want to look into it a little bit more and see exactly what's going on inside this guy's head. This is a person I know quite well because, I spoke to him regularly over a period of about, certainly over a year, and I've probably conducted about, over 200 hours of interviews with him. So I know this person very well. I know exactly how he thinks, and I know what his autogynephilic artifact actually is, and it is himself, but as a homosexual transsexual. He's not erotically excited by the idea of himself as a woman. He's erotically excited by the idea of himself as a homosexual transsexual. Except, big problem, he's not actually homosexual. Now, I have come across something very similar in Southeast Asia, where you'll find many people like this inside the, for example, the pageant scene. The pageant scene is absolutely dominated by autogynephilic transvestites. Homosexual transsexuals rarely manage to succeed in that milieu. I mean, Kevin Ballot, who is absolutely gorgeous and very much is HSTS, true transsexual, is an exception. And she did it because she was, at that time, she was very young and she was really exceptionally lovely. And she was just so stunning that she defeated all of the other girls, to win the crown. Mostly the HSTS are too short to win in things like that because, you've got to understand that AGPs here mostly are like 5'8", 5'9", sometimes over 6 feet, whereas most of the HSTS are going to be, certainly under 5'6". So they tend to kind of disappear, when it's in competition, when they're on stage. It's the very tall, big AGPs tend to be the ones that really catch the judge's eye. But a lot of these girls who compete in these pageants, their ETLE is not on being a woman. They know they're not women. Their ETLE is on being, a gorgeous transsexual. Now, so it's not quite the same as the man we're talking about in England, but the culture is different. I mean, you do actually have a culture of beauty pageants and other places where autogynephilic males who have transitioned can display their performance of beauty, and that allows them a place to be and to exist and to get reward that way. And it's all fine. This is all, in my opinion, extremely healthy. It allows these men to basically get the reward they seek without actually harming anyone else. Now, the problem that we're talking about with this person is that he's English. He comes from England. There is no such culture in England. So he has this obsession with the idea of himself as a homosexual transsexual. Now, I need to come to something else from that point. There is a very particular issue with men like this. They may still, in terms of women, be quite deferential towards women. Most men are, we all believe in the idea of female privilege, so, you don't hurt women, you don't beat women up, you don't dab, all that kind of stuff, you behave yourself. And autogynephiles are no different. But when it comes to HSTS, all the bets are off. Because the autogynephile doesn't see the HSTS as a woman, he sees the HSTS, the true transsexual, as someone like himself, which is completely wrong because there is no similarity. The true transsexual, that is the homosexual transsexual, is homosexual, is attracted to men, is not attracted to men in dresses. And this causes a problem because this type of person is going to want to have sexual affirmation from his contact with true or homosexual transsexuals. And because he doesn't see them as women, he's liable to break the kind of social rules that would be normal with women. And he may do things which are completely inappropriate. I certainly know here I'm not accusing this man of actually doing this, although I know he has behaved inappropriately. I certainly know true transsexuals here, homosexual transsexuals, who have physically been raped by AGPs. You have to remember that in most cases, and this is not an absolute rule, but in most cases, nearly all cases actually, HSTS true transsexuals will be much smaller, lighter, and weaker than AGPs. AGPs are just like men, big and strong. HSTS are like women, they're small and petite, not very strong. And so it becomes relatively easy for an AGP to physically overpower an HSTS and coerce her into sex. And this is a culture where nobody's going to pay a blind bit of notice. The police aren't going to do anything. It's two ladyboys. So what? It doesn't matter. They're just not going to take any interest. I mean, it would be different if that sort of thing happened in the United Kingdom, where there would be a police response, but not here. No, the police just ain't going to do anything about it. In the situation in the UK, and I think it's the same in America, these people tend to go for slightly safer attempts at gaining sexual reward, and they will attempt to be with the objects of their sexual desire, and they will try to get physical contact with them. What they want to do is to be naked in bed with them, even if they have had vaginoplasty. They are still men. You know, as Blanchard said, these are basically men without a penis. So you've got this man who's going to want to have some sort of set of affirming sexual behaviour with the homosexual transsexual he's with, but he doesn't have a penis. It's possible that the HSTS still does have a penis, and in that case he will expect her to penetrate him. And this is really going to mess with a lot of people's heads. You know, it's like, wow. What will happen typically in an encounter like this is that the autogynephile, this is the one whose ETLE is on being an HSTS, a true transsexual, will approach as a friend and ally. So we'll all be very cerebral and very, I want to be friendly, and we can go to the museum and then go and feed the ducks at the pond and that sort of thing. What you have to understand is that not all sexual reward actually involves sex. It doesn't always involve touching genitalia or orgasming. All of these things, going to the museum, feeding the ducks, are sexualized rewards for the autogynephile, because he's doing it with an example of his erotic target. You know, that person out there matches the erotic target within himself. He wants to be her. How do you get to be someone? Well, typically they'll do things like trying to touch, and as much touching as possible. Arms around, that sort of thing. Possession. The succubus inside the autogynephile is trying to possess the HSTS, to try and, they're not, it's almost like vampires, although, they don't actually suck blood. They're kind of trying to suck out the essence that they think animates the person whose identity they're absolutely obsessed with, and whom they want to be themselves. But that essence is homosexuality. That is what drives a true transsexual, is the fact that she's a homosexual male. And she wants heterosexual masculine men, so she appears to be a woman. It's really basic, simple stuff. AGPs, no. They're not like that. They're very much more complicated and frankly, a lot more dangerous. I mean, in all honesty, HSTS, as true transsexuals, are amongst the most harmless people you could possibly imagine. They just don't do anything bad. They're not going to go out and molest children. They're not going to go out and, rape people. They're not going to go and do anything bad at all. They're, by and large, the sweetest, kindest, and most gentle people I have ever met. And I've met a fair few of them now. I mean, we're well into three figures. And I would say that is true of all homosexual transsexuals. They're just lovely, lovely people. I could not possibly say that about autogynephiles. I have met some autogynephiles who were nice people, but by and large, no. By and large, I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw them. And this gentleman in England, is absolutely classic. I mean, I know that he inveigled himself into a particular HSTS's house managed to persuade her to go to his hotel room and then tried to undress in front of her. I mean, why she got there, I don't know. I mean, don't do things like that, you know. But the problem is that this man had already basically brainwashed the HSTS. And they're very, very good at gaslighting. All AGPs gaslight people around them all the time. It's a constant thing with them. And the whole thing about, oh, I'm a real woman and all that. I mean, no, they're not real women. But they will gaslight. They will constantly be pressing this idea that you must accept me as I am, otherwise, I shall cry, or I shall do something bad, or I shall be very, very angry if you don't go along with this, and I shall make a scene. I shall make a terrible, terrible scene. That's what they're like. And of course, the poor HSTS is like, well, anything for peace, because that's what they like. It's like, I want peace. I want peace and quiet. So, I'll go along with this. I'll go to his hotel room. And this particular individual, when the person, the AGP, started to undress, got as far as his underwear, and she was horrified and said, no, you've got to stop. I don't want to see what you've got there. I don't want to see this. It's horrible. And, he's not particularly an attractive person. Whereas she is a very, very attractive transsexual. There's no doubt about that. She's a very pretty girl indeed. And you can see why she triggers him. You can see why she's got his a radar just going zingy, 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 and focusing in on her. So anyway, this is a very interesting situation where you have this completely, perhaps an ETLE that people didn't think of, that someone who is actually autogynephilic could have this ETLE in which he is turned on by the idea of being a homosexual transsexual. Not so much the idea of being a woman, but the idea of being a homosexual transsexual, which he isn't, which he is not. Let's be quite clear. These are not HSTS. They are not transsexuals. They're transvestites. Like all other AGPs, they're transvestites. AGPs don't have to cross-dress to be transvestite, by the way, because the transvestism happens inside their heads. I mean, how basic do you have to be? I mean, they're imagining themselves in a role, and in that role they're playing women. So that's their expression of transvestism. In their heads, in their sexual fantasies, they are women. They may not actually do it in public, although they might, but it doesn't actually change what they are. They're all the same. Anyway, there you are. That's for today. I hope you enjoyed that. And when you meet people like this, if you're out there and you're meeting people whom you think who claim to be transsexuals, that is, homosexual transsexuals, be very, very careful, because there's quite a number of people with this particular ETLE, that is, AGPs, autogynephilic males, who are, obsessed with the idea of being homosexual transsexuals, and they will tell any lie under the sun. They just will. They'll just lie and lie and lie to get you to believe that their story is true, and they'll fabricate evidence. They'll do, it's awful what they do. You need to be aware of that, especially if you're a potential target. That is, a young, pretty homosexual transsexual yourself, or that's an area where you don't want to be. You don't want to be alone with a person like I'm discussing. You just don't. Don't be in the same room. Certainly not alone. I mean, make sure that there's always company, that doors open, that sort of thing. Because these people, because they don't see you as women, and they don't see you as having that protection that women should have, and rightly so, that makes you a potential victim of a physical attack. Potentially. Not all will do that, but we know that AGPs in other circumstances, for example, Karen White, yeah, they do. When they're in the presence of their erotic targets, they can get physical very quickly. So beware. This is another type, and this type will almost certainly try to inveigle himself into the company of HSTS in a way that maybe AGPs who are fixated on natal women can't do, because the woman will always know that she's looking at a man in a dress with autogynephiles. I mean, she might not know that with an HSTS, but she's certainly going to know it with an autogynephile. But there's a grey area where an HSTS might be fooled, especially a young, inexperienced one, might be fooled by a person like this, and things could happen which are not what she desires. They could happen. I'm not saying they would happen, but I'm saying they could happen. So please be careful. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.